I found Leo's diary tucked inside a hollowed-out book in his old room. My hands shook as I opened it. The first entry was dated the week he vanished. My son, David, told everyone Leo ran away. But Leo wrote about his father's gambling, the men who came to the house, the shouting. Then, the words that stopped my heart. Dad said he has no choice. He sold me to pay them. I read it 3 times. The room felt cold. I heard David's car pull into the driveway. I shoved the diary under my sweater. I had to know more before anyone realized I knew. My own son. He sold his child, my grandson. I forced a smile as I walked out, my heart a block of ice. I would uncover every lie, every single one. I went to the kitchen, the diary pressed against my side. David was unloading groceries, acting normal. He didn't look at me. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, was on the phone in the living room, laughing. They all knew. They had to. I was losing my mind, the peace I thought I had. I needed to copy the diary, to have proof somewhere safe. I couldn't risk them finding it. They were always there, their watchful eyes pretending everything was fine. I decided to use the old scanner in the basement. As I reached for the basement door, Sarah called out, "Everything all right, Mum?" Her voice was sweet, empty. I said I was just getting some preserves. Downstairs, I opened the scanner lid. The power was dead. The outlet was loose. I'd meant to fix it for years. Everything was working against me. I couldn't scan it here. I heard footsteps on the stairs. David called down, "You need help with something?" I closed the scanner, my pulse racing. I said I was just checking for mice. He lingered on the steps, watching me. I had to get the diary out of the house. I slipped it into my large sewing bag. As I walked past him, he glanced at the bag. He didn't say anything, but his eyes narrowed just a fraction. He knew I was hiding something. I took the diary to the public library. It was the only place I could be alone with my thoughts. I sat in a corner carrel, the familiar smell of old books around me. I continued reading. Leo described a van, a long drive, being handed over to a man named Kreshnik. He was sent to work in a warehouse, his passport taken. He was 15. My hands were fists on the table. David did this. My own flesh and blood. My path was clear. I needed to find a lawyer, someone who could help me use this information legally. It would tear my family apart, leaving only silence behind. I was running out of time. David and Sarah were already suspicious after yesterday. I copied key pages on the library photocopier, my hands steady now. I hid the copies in different books in the stacks, a secret archive. As I was leaving, I saw my neighbour, Mrs. Gable, at the front desk. She smiled and waved. I waved back, my face a mask. She might mention seeing me here. I walked to the bus stop, the originals safe in my bag. On the bus, I planned my next move. I needed a lawyer who specialized in family or immigration law. Leo might still be out there. I had to find him. The bus jerked to a stop. A man got on, his face familiar. He was one of David's friends from his poker nights. He nodded at me, his eyes lingering a moment too long. He sat a few rows back. I didn't look his way again. When I got off at my stop, he did too. He wasn't following me. He lived nearby. But the coincidence felt like a warning. I walked faster, clutching my bag. At my front door, I fumbled for my keys. The door was unlocked. I always lock it. I pushed it open slowly. David was sitting in my armchair, waiting. "We need to talk, Mum," he said. His voice was low, controlled. My blood ran cold. David didn't get up. He just watched me from the chair. "You've been acting strange," he said. "Going to the library? You hate the library." I set my bag down carefully, the diary inside. I said I was researching genealogy. A weak lie. He smiled, a thin, unpleasant stretch of his lips. Sure. Look, Mum, Sarah and I are worried about you. Your memory. We think it might be time to consider assisted living. The words hung in the air. Assisted living. A pretty name for a cage. I had to deflect, to make him think I was just a confused old woman. I could lose my independence, my home. He was so calm and certain. He had a plan. I forced a tremble into my hands. My memory is fine, David. I just get lonely. I looked at the floor, playing the part. He stood up and patted my shoulder. We'll look into some places. For your own good. After he left, I stood in the silent house. This was his move. He wanted me out of the way. I went to the phone and called my friend Betty. Her son is a lawyer. I asked for his number, saying I needed advice on my will. Betty gave it to me, no questions asked. I hung up, my heart pounding. I couldn't call from the house phone. David might have the bill checked, another obstacle. I needed a payphone. They're hard to find now. I drove to the grocery store, the one with an old phone booth outside. I dialed the number Betty gave me. A receptionist answered. I asked for an appointment with Attorney Miller. She said he was booked for weeks. I insisted it was urgent, family matters. She put me on hold. I watched people come and go from the store, living their normal lives. Then a voice came on the line. A man. This is Ben Miller. I started to explain, my voice low. I told him I had evidence my grandson was trafficked by my son. There was a long silence. Then he said, Meet me at my office tomorrow at 10. Come alone. And Mrs. Wilkes? Don't tell anyone. I agreed and hung up. A spark of hope. I drove home, planning what to say. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I went to my bedroom. The drawer where I kept the diary copies was slightly open. I always close it tight. Someone had been in my room. I checked the hiding spots I'd made for the photocopies. One was missing. The one behind the loose baseboard in the hall closet. They knew, or they suspected enough to search. Tomorrow, I had to get to that lawyer, to hand over what I had. It would shatter my relationship with David, maybe with my entire family. They had invaded my privacy, trying to control the story. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, thinking of Leo's face, his smile. I had to be strong for him. In the morning, I dressed carefully. I put the remaining diary pages and my notes into a large envelope. I would take the bus. Using my car might be too obvious. David usually left for work by 8. I waited until I heard his car leave. I went to the kitchen. Sarah was there, making coffee. Off somewhere, Mum? She asked, too brightly. I said I had a doctor's appointment, a routine checkup. She nodded, but her eyes were sharp. Do you need a ride? I can take you. I declined, saying I enjoyed the bus. Then, as I was leaving, my granddaughter, Lily, David's daughter, was at the door. She's 12. She hugged me. Grandma, are you okay? Dad said you might have to go away for a while. Her words were a knife. I hugged her back, my eyes stinging. I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't you worry. I walked to the bus stop, the envelope heavy in my tote bag. The bus was late. I stood there, feeling exposed. A car slowed down. It was David's friend, the one from the bus. He rolled down the window. Need a lift, Mrs. Wilkes? He asked. I shook my head, my throat tight. He drove off. The bus finally came. I got on, finding a seat in the back. I looked out the window. David's car was parked a block down, idling. He was following me. He knew I wasn't going to the doctor. I got off the bus 2 stops early, near the park. I walked quickly through the paths, my heart hammering. I couldn't lead David directly to the lawyer. I ducked behind a public restroom, watching the street. His car drove slowly past, then continued. He'd lost me for now. I had 20 minutes to get to the office. I walked the rest of the way, my knees aching. Ben Miller's office was in a small, old building downtown. I took the elevator to the third floor. The receptionist led me to a tidy room. Ben Miller was younger than I expected, with kind eyes. I handed him the envelope. He read in silence, his expression growing grim. He looked up. "This is serious, Mrs. Wilkes. We need to contact the authorities. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, the FBI." My relief was so profound, I felt dizzy. Finally, someone was listening. I had to face that my son was a monster. David was probably searching for me right now. Ben said he would make the calls, but he needed me to sign some papers, giving him permission to act on my behalf. As he prepared the documents, his phone buzzed. He answered, his face neutral. He listened, then said, "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." He hung up and looked at me. "That was the front desk. A man is downstairs asking if you're here. He says he's your son, and he's concerned for your welfare." David had found me. Ben's expression was firm. "I'll have my receptionist tell him you're not here." "But Mrs. Wilkes, you should know. He's not alone. He has a woman with him. Says she's from Adult Protective Services." My breath caught. He brought the system to his side. They were here to take me away. Ben stood. "Wait here. Don't open this door." He left, locking it behind him. I heard raised voices in the hallway. Then, a key turned in the lock. The door opened. It wasn't Ben. It was a woman in a suit, a badge clipped to her belt. "Eleanor Wilkes?" she said. "I'm with APS. We need to have a word about your living situation." Behind her, I saw David's satisfied face. The APS woman stood in the doorway, her posture official and unyielding. David hovered behind her, a mask of concern on his face. I saw the triumph in his eyes. Ben Miller stepped forward, placing himself slightly between me and them. "This is my client, and we are in the middle of a confidential meeting," he said, his voice calm but firm. The woman, whose badge read G. Henderson, ignored him. "We've received a report expressing serious concerns about your capacity to live independently, Mrs. Wilkes. We need to assess your situation." My freedom was on the line, right here. David was using the state to silence me. I had to appear perfectly lucid, but not defiant. I clasped my hands to stop their shaking. "I am perfectly capable," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My son is mistaken." Ben intervened again. "Any assessment will require prior notice and can be scheduled through me. This is an inappropriate interruption." Ms. Henderson glanced at David, then back at me. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." The threat was clear. I knew if they took me for an evaluation, David would have time to destroy evidence, to solidify his story. I looked at Ben, a silent plea. He understood. "My client is not going anywhere with you today," he stated. "If you proceed, I will be filing a complaint for harassment and unlawful attempted seizure." The legal language seemed to give Ms. Henderson pause. She looked at David again, less certain. David stepped forward. "Mom, just go with them. They can help you." His voice was a sickening syrup. I looked directly at him, my gaze flat. "I don't need your kind of help, David." The silence in the room was heavy. Ms. Henderson finally nodded. "We will be in touch to schedule a proper evaluation." She turned and left. David shot me a look of pure venom before following her. Ben closed the door, and let out a long breath. That was close. We need to move fast. I'm calling the hotline right now. But as he reached for the phone, his receptionist burst in, her face pale. Mr. Miller, the police are here. They say they received a welfare check request for an elderly woman being held against her will in this office. Two uniformed officers entered the room. One, a young woman, had a polite but alert expression. The other, an older man, scanned the room quickly. "We got a call about a possible situation here," the older officer said. David had escalated this beautifully. He was painting me as a confused old woman and my lawyer as a kidnapper. My credibility was evaporating by the second. Ben handled it with impressive calm. He explained who he was, that I was his client of sound mind, and that my son was attempting an unlawful conservatorship grab because I had evidence of his criminal activity. The officers listened, their faces neutral. The younger officer turned to me. "Ma'am, are you here of your own free will?" I looked her in the eye. "Yes, I am. My son, David, sold my grandson into forced labor. I have proof. He is now trying to have me declared incompetent to stop me." I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. The older officer asked Ben, "What proof?" Before Ben could answer, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Gable. "Eleanor, there are two men in suits at your house. They went inside with David. They look official." My blood ran cold. They were in my house. They were searching for the diary. I showed the text to Ben and the officers. "He's in my home right now without my permission, with unknown individuals." This changed the dynamics. A potential burglary in progress. The older officer spoke into his radio, requesting a unit to my address. He then looked at Ben. "We're going to need to see that evidence." Ben handed him the envelope. As the officer skimmed the pages, his demeanor shifted from routine to serious. He looked at me. "We'll need you to come down to the station to give a full statement." I agreed. As we were leaving the office, my phone buzzed again. It was David. The message was simple. "You should have listened, Mom. Now you've left me no choice." I showed it to the officer. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened. At the police station, I gave my statement to a detective. I told her everything, from finding the diary to David's threat. It took hours. I was exhausted. My story a tangled web of family betrayal. Ben stayed with me the whole time. The detective was thorough, her questions sharp. She confirmed they had sent officers to my house, but the men in suits were gone. David had claimed he was there to check on pipes for a leak, and the men were plumbers. A perfect, logical excuse. He was always so clever. They couldn't hold him. As we left the station, the detective told me they would open an investigation into Leo's disappearance based on the diary, but it would take time. Time I might not have. David knew the system was in motion now. He would become more desperate. Ben drove me home. "You shouldn't stay here alone tonight," he advised. But where could I go? A hotel? David would find me. I decided to call my friend Betty. She was the only person I trusted. She answered on the first ring. I didn't give details, just said I had a family emergency and needed a place to stay for a night. She didn't hesitate. "Come right over, Eleanor." Ben dropped me off a block from her house. I walked the rest of the way, feeling like a fugitive. Betty welcomed me in, asking no questions. She made tea and gave me her guest room. Lying in the strange bed, I thought about the ledger. Leo's diary mentioned a black ledger where David kept his special accounts. I had never seen it. If the diary was the confession, the ledger was the proof. Names, amounts, transactions. I had to find it. But it wouldn't be in the house. David was too smart for that. I thought about his habits, his routines. He always went to the self-storage unit on the other side of town every few weeks. He said it was for old sports equipment. I never questioned it. What if the ledger was there? Finding it meant breaking into a locked storage unit, a crime, but it was the only way to get the evidence the police needed to move faster. I stared at the ceiling. I was a 72-year-old woman planning a break-in. What had my life become? The next morning, I told Betty I was feeling better and headed home. I had to act normal. My house felt different, violated. Drawers were not quite closed, items were slightly shifted. They had searched everything. I went straight to the garage and found the spare key to David's storage unit. He'd given it to me years ago to fetch a Christmas decoration box and never asked for it back. It was still on my keyring. Now I needed the unit number. I remembered the invoice was in a kitchen drawer, mixed with other papers. I rifled through it, my heart pounding, and found it. Unit B17. I had the key and the location. I knew what I had to do, but it meant sacrificing my own morality. I was about to become a criminal to prove my son was one. The pressure was immense. David could check on the unit at any time. I drove across town, my hands tight on the wheel. The storage facility was large and impersonal. I used the code David always used, our old home phone number, to get through the gate. I drove to the B section, found Unit 17. It was a standard grey roll-up door. I looked around. The place was quiet, a few people far in the distance. I slid the key into the padlock. It turned smoothly. I took a deep breath and rolled the door up just enough to slip inside. It was dark and smelled of dust and old cardboard. I used my phone as a flashlight. There were boxes labelled kids' clothes and Xmas, just as he'd said. But in the back was a small fireproof safe. The ledger had to be in there. It was locked. Of course. I felt a surge of despair. I couldn't crack a safe. I shone the light around, looking for anything else. Then I saw it, tucked behind a stack of old tires. A laptop bag. I pulled it out. It was David's old work laptop. He never threw anything away. Maybe he was sentimental. Maybe he was stupid. I unzipped the bag. The laptop was inside. I prayed it still had a charge. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up. It asked for a password. I tried Leo's birthday. Incorrect. I tried Sarah's birthday. Incorrect. I thought of the diary, of his guilt. I typed in the word, "forgive me." The screen unlocked. I was in. I didn't have time to browse. I needed to get the laptop out of there. I shoved it into my large tote bag and rolled the storage door down, relocking it. I drove to a nearby fast food restaurant, my heart thumping wildly. In a corner booth, I opened the laptop. I went straight to the documents folder. There were hundreds of files. I searched for ledger, Kreshnik, debts. Nothing. Then I found a folder named Tax Archives. Inside was a spreadsheet file called Business Expenses 2018. I opened it. It wasn't business expenses. It was a list of dates, amounts in the tens of thousands, and initials. KA appeared multiple times. Kreshnik. And then I saw it. A line that made me gasp. LS. The amount was staggering. The notation was Final Settlement. LS Leo Sanders. My grandson. He had put a price on his own son's head in a spreadsheet labelled as a tax document. It was cold, clinical, and utterly damning. I plugged a small flash drive I always carried into the laptop and copied the entire Tax Archives folder. This was it. This was the proof that could bury him. As I was ejecting the drive, an email notification popped up on the screen. It was from David. The preview read, "If you're reading this, you're too late. I've already moved the assets. She'll never find..." The rest was cut off. My blood went cold. What assets? What had he done? I closed the laptop, my hands trembling. I had the evidence, but he was steps ahead. He knew someone might find this. He was cleaning house. I had to get this to Ben and the police immediately. I drove to Ben's office, not caring if David saw me. I rushed upstairs. The receptionist was gone. Ben's door was open. He was on the phone, his face ashen. He saw me and hung up. "Eleanor," he said, his voice hollow. "I just got a call from the bank. David, as your power of attorney, emptied your savings and investment accounts this morning. He's cleaned you out." The room tilted. Ben's words echoed. My life savings? Gone. David had used the power of attorney I'd signed years ago for emergencies. I never imagined it would be used against me. My financial security was erased with a few clicks. I had to act before he could liquidate everything else, like the house. I knew what I had to do: revoke his power immediately and file a police report for theft. I had lost everything. All I had left was my home and my resolve. Ben was already on the phone, his voice urgent. "I'm calling the bank to freeze what's left and drafting the revocation documents now." He spoke to someone, demanding to speak to a manager. I handed him the flash drive. "This is the ledger from his laptop. It proves everything." Ben took it, his eyes grim. As he was talking, my phone rang. It was my daughter, Clara. She never calls out of the blue. I answered, my voice shaky. "Mom? David just called me. He said you're having a mental breakdown, that you're accusing him of terrible things. Is it true?" The pressure was immense. He was turning my own daughter against me. I took a deep breath. "Clara, David sold Leo. I have proof." There was a long silence. Then, "Mom, that's insane. Leo ran away. You need help." She hung up. The rejection stung deeply. Ben finished his call. "The bank is putting a freeze on your accounts, but most of the funds are already withdrawn. We need to get to the police station with this new evidence." We headed out. As we walked to his car, a black sedan pulled up across the street. The driver didn't get out, just watched us. I couldn't see the face clearly, but the car looked official. Was it APS, the police, or someone else? Ben noticed it too. "Get in the car, Eleanor." We drove off, the sedan not following. At the station, we met with Detective Evans. We showed her the flash drive. She plugged it in, her expression growing more serious with each scroll. "This is compelling," she said. "We'll need to bring your son in for questioning." As she said that, her desk phone rang. She answered, listened, and then looked at me. That was dispatch. "Your son, David, has just filed a missing persons report. For you." David had reported me missing. The irony was bitter. Now the police were legally obligated to find me and check my welfare, which would delay everything. Detective Evans was caught in the middle. "I have to log this," she said, her tone apologetic. "But given the circumstances, I'll process your evidence simultaneously." I needed to avoid being detained on a welfare check so I could help the investigation. My freedom was at stake. If they took me in, David could spin any story. Ben argued that I was clearly of sound mind and was reporting a crime. The pressure was mounting from all sides. We provided my statement about the financial theft and the ledger. Detective Evans assigned an officer to escort me home to confirm my whereabouts and close the missing person report. Ben came with me. The car ride was silent. When we arrived at my house, David's car was in the driveway. He was standing on the porch with two uniformed officers. He looked relieved to see me. A perfect performance. "Mum, thank God you're okay. We were so worried." I didn't respond. The officers approached. One of them, Officer Miles, recognized me from the station. "Mrs. Wilkes, we just need to confirm you're safe and voluntary." I said I was. David stepped forward. "See, officer? She's confused. She wanders off. She needs professional care." I looked at Officer Miles. "My son stole my money and sold his own child. The evidence is with Detective Evans." David laughed, a hollow sound. "See? Delusions." But Officer Miles had been briefed. "Mr. Sanders, we're aware of the ongoing investigation. We're here only for the welfare check." The check was completed quickly. As the officers left, David stayed, his smile fading. "You can't win this, Mom." He turned and left. Ben and I went inside. My house felt like a battlefield. I went to the landline phone to call Betty, to thank her for her help. The phone was dead. The line had been cut. The dead phone line was a violation. David must have done it while he was in the house earlier to isolate me. I had to restore communication and secure my home. My sense of safety was gone. I was truly alone now. Ben used his cell to call the phone company to report the outage and request a repair. He also arranged for a locksmith to change all the locks. "You can't stay here alone tonight, Eleanor," he said. I knew he was right, but I refused to be driven out of my own home. I called Betty from Ben's phone and explained the situation. She insisted I come back to her place. I agreed, for one more night. While Ben waited for the locksmith, I packed a small bag. I included the original diary and the flash drive copies. As I was zipping the bag, I noticed a small, familiar box on my dresser. It was Leo's, a wooden box he'd made in shop class. I hadn't opened it in years. Something made me lift the lid. Inside, under some old school pins, was a folded piece of paper. It was a note in Leo's handwriting, dated just before he disappeared. "Grandma, if anything happens, check Dad's gym bag, the one with the red stripe. Love you." My breath caught. It was a shock, a clue I'd overlooked for years. Why his gym bag? David hadn't used a gym in ages. I remembered he kept an old duffel bag in the attic. I had to check it. Ben was still on the phone downstairs. I hurried to the attic, my knees complaining with each step. The bag was there, dusty and forgotten. I unzipped it. Inside, under musty clothes, was a sealed envelope. I opened it. It contained a single key and a small slip of paper with an address written on it. The address was in a city over 200 miles away. What was this? A safe deposit box? A storage unit? Leo must have hidden this for me. I pocketed the key and the paper. When I came downstairs, the locksmith was finished. Ben drove me to Betty's. I didn't tell him about the key yet. I needed to think. At Betty's, I examined the address. It was for a place called Secure Store Self-Storage, another unit. But this one was in Leo's name. Or was it? I used Betty's computer to search the address. It was a real storage facility. I called them, pretending to be Leo's grandmother inquiring about an account. The clerk said the unit was under the name L. Sanders, and the payment was auto-debited from an account. But the account was recently closed. The unit would be auctioned if fees weren't paid within 48 hours. The clock was ticking. Leo's storage unit held answers, and it was about to be lost forever. I had to get to that unit before the auction. The journey was daunting. A long drive, using the last of my cash, and risking that David might be monitoring me. I couldn't involve Ben or the police yet. I had no proof what was inside. I thanked Betty and told her I had an errand to run. I withdrew the maximum from my frozen account using my debit card at an ATM. It only gave me $200. It would have to be enough for gas and fees. I drove my old sedan, the one David always said was unreliable. The drive was long, my back aching from the tension. I thought about Leo, what he might have hidden. The pressure was constant. Every car behind me felt like a threat. I reached the city by afternoon. Secure Store was a smaller, older facility than David's. I went to the office. The clerk was a young man with a bored expression. I said I was here to pay the fees for L. Sanders' unit. He looked it up. That unit is scheduled for clearance tomorrow. The late fees are $80. I paid in cash. He gave me a new code for the gate and the unit number, C8. I drove in, my heart pounding. Unit C8 was a small metal door. I used the key from the gym bag. It fit. I rolled up the door. The unit was barely larger than a closet. Inside was a single cardboard box. I opened it. On top were Leo's childhood things, a baseball glove, some books. But underneath was a stack of envelopes. I opened one. It was filled with photographs of Leo with other teenagers in what looked like a warehouse setting. They looked tired, scared. Another envelope contained handwritten notes, names, dates, and locations. It was a list of other kids, their destinations. Leo had been documenting everything. At the very bottom was a small black notebook. I opened it. It was a diary, but more recent. The last entry was from 3 months ago. He wrote about being moved to a new location, a farm, and his hope that I would find this. He was alive. Or he was, 3 months ago. My hands trembled as I held the notebook. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Stop looking. You found what you wanted. Leave it alone, or he dies for real this time. The message was followed by a blurry photo of Leo, looking much older, with a bruise on his cheek. The threat was direct. They knew I had the storage unit contents, and they had Leo. Instantly, I knew what I must do. Get this new evidence to the authorities without endangering him further. Leo's safety was on the line. Any wrong move could be fatal. I quickly loaded the box into my car, my mind racing. Who sent the text? David? Kreshnik? I drove away from the storage facility, heading back towards home. I couldn't go to the local police here. This was now a federal matter, and I needed Detective Evans. The pressure was unbearable. Every minute counted. I called Ben from the road, using hands-free. I told him everything: the key, the storage unit, the new diary, the threat. He was silent for a moment. Eleanor, you need to come straight to the police station. Do not stop anywhere. This is beyond a family dispute now. This is a hostage situation. I agreed. As I drove, I noticed a car following me. It was a dark SUV, keeping a steady distance. Was it the same one from before? I changed lanes, sped up, slowed down. The SUV matched my moves. They were tailing me. I couldn't lead them to the police station. I took the next exit, heading into a busy shopping district. I pulled into a large supermarket parking lot, losing myself in the rows of cars. The SUV didn't follow me in. I parked near the entrance, my heart thudding. I sat there for a minute, catching my breath. Then I saw him. David was standing by a cart return, watching my car. He had found me. How? My phone? My car? He started walking towards me, his face calm but determined. I locked the doors. He tapped on the window. Mum, we need to talk. You're making this worse for everyone. I didn't roll down the window. I shook my head. He smiled, a cold, empty smile. Then he held up his phone, showing me the screen. It was a live video feed. It showed Leo in a small, dark room, looking directly at the camera, his eyes wide with fear. David held the phone to the window, the live video of Leo freezing me in place. My grandson was alive, but the fear in his eyes was a physical pain. I had to get this new evidence to the police without David knowing, to protect Leo. My own safety meant nothing now. David's voice was low through the glass. Turn off your phone and come with me, or I end the call, and you never see him again. He was using Leo as a leash. I nodded, playing the defeated old woman. I opened the car door slowly, keeping the box of evidence on the passenger seat hidden under my coat. I stepped out, my legs weak. All right, David, I'll come. I reached for my purse as if to get my keys, but instead, I pressed the car's panic button on my key fob. The alarm blared, loud and startling in the quiet parking lot. People turned to look. David flinched, distracted for a second. That was all I needed. I slammed the car door shut, locking it, and stumbled away towards the supermarket entrance, shouting, "Help! This man is threatening me." A store employee and a few shoppers rushed over. David, seeing the attention, shoved his phone in his pocket and retreated quickly to his car, speeding away. The alarm was still wailing. I leaned against the cart corral, catching my breath. The employee asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, just a family dispute. I turned off the alarm and got back in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I drove out of the lot, checking my mirrors. No sign of David. I pulled over a few blocks away and called Ben. I told him about the live video and the threat. He said to meet him at the police station immediately. They could trace the video feed. But as I started the engine again, I noticed a slip of paper on the floor. It must have fallen from the box. It was a receipt from a shipping company, dated 2 months ago, addressed to a P.O. box in the next state. The name on it was Kreshnik. I drove straight to the police station, the shipping receipt burning a hole in my pocket. This could be a way to find Kreshnik, and through him, Leo. I needed to hand over all the evidence and let the professionals handle it, but I feared delays or leaks. Ben was waiting for me outside. We went in together to see Detective Evans. I showed her the new diary, the photos, the list of names, and the receipt. Her demeanor was all business now. "This changes everything," she said. "We'll get the tech unit to analyze the video feed from your son's phone and trace that P.O. box." She left to make calls. I sat in the hard plastic chair, feeling a sliver of hope. I had lost my relationship with David, but that was already gone. Ben stayed with me, making notes. After an hour, Detective Evans returned. "We've got a warrant for the P.O. box and are working on locating the source of that live feed. We're also putting out a bolo for your son." She advised me to stay somewhere safe, as David was now considered armed and dangerous based on the threats. Ben offered to let me stay at his office's spare room, which had a security system. I agreed. As we were leaving the station, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. "You involved the cops. Big mistake. Say goodbye to your house." My heart sank. My home. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Gable. "Eleanor, I just saw David and another man at your house. They were carrying things out. I thought you knew." I told Ben. He called the police to report a possible burglary. We drove to my house. The front door was wide open. Inside, it was ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, furniture overturned. David had taken anything of value, and, I realized with dread, he had been looking for more evidence. But he didn't find the original diary. It was with me. As I stood in the wreckage of my living room, I noticed something missing. The framed photos of Leo from the mantelpiece. He had taken those too. Why? As a trophy? Or to hurt me more? Then my eyes fell on the fireplace. Smeared in the ashes was a single word. Sorry. The word sorry in the ashes felt like a mockery. Was it from David? Or had Leo been here? My home was violated. But I couldn't focus on that. I had to help the police find Leo before David could move him. The pressure was immense. Every passing minute could be critical. The police forensic team arrived to dust for prints. Ben helped me board up the broken door. I stayed with him at his office, the evidence locked in his safe. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the shipping receipt. What if David was using that P.O. box to communicate with Kreshnik? I needed to see if there was any recent activity. The next morning, I asked Ben to drive me to the shipping company branch listed on the receipt. It was a long shot, but I had to try. The clerk was hesitant to give information without a warrant, but when I mentioned it was about a missing child and showed her Leo's photo, her expression softened. She checked the records. "That P.O. box was closed last week," she said, "but the holder left a forwarding address for any mail." She wrote it down on a slip of paper. It was an address in a rural town about 50 miles away. I thanked her, my hands trembling. Ben called Detective Evans with the information. She said they would send a unit to check it out, but it might take time to coordinate with local authorities. I couldn't wait. I felt a desperate urge to go there myself. Ben argued against it, but I insisted. He finally agreed to drive me, but only if we stayed in the car and called the police if we saw anything. The drive was tense. We found the address, a secluded farmhouse with a rusty mailbox. No cars were visible. We parked down the road, watching. After 20 minutes, a truck pulled up. A man got out, tall, with a beard. He looked around nervously before going inside. I recognized him from one of Leo's photos. It was Kreshnik. My breath caught. We were in the right place. Ben was about to call the police when my phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. "I see you. Turn around and leave, or the boy gets hurt." They were watching us. We were being watched. I had to decide: retreat and let the police handle it, or risk everything for a chance to save Leo now. Ben was already dialing Detective Evans, his voice low and urgent. I stared at the farmhouse, imagining Leo inside. The thought of failing was unbearable. Ben finished the call. "They're sending a tactical team, but it'll take at least an hour to assemble and get here." An hour? Leo could be moved or worse in that time. The pressure built. I couldn't just sit here. I noticed a dirt path leading behind the farmhouse, possibly a way to approach unseen. I told Ben I was going to sneak closer to see if I could spot Leo through a window. He protested, but I was already opening the car door. "Stay here and guide the police when they arrive," I said. I moved slowly, using trees and bushes for cover. My old bones protested, but I pushed on. I reached the side of the house and peered through a grimy window. Inside, I saw Leo. He was sitting on a cot, his head in his hands. He looked thinner, older. My heart ached. Then Kreshnik entered the room and grabbed Leo's arm, pulling him up. They were arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but Leo shook his head defiantly. Kreshnik raised his hand, as if to strike him. Without thinking, I picked up a rock and threw it at the window next to me, shattering the glass. The noise startled them. Kreshnik turned towards the sound, and Leo used that moment to knee him in the groin. Kreshnik doubled over, and Leo bolted for the door. I ran towards the front of the house, shouting for Leo. He burst out the front door, his eyes wide with fear and recognition. "Grandma!" he yelled. We hugged for a second, but then Kreshnik emerged, holding a knife. "Get back inside!" he snarled. Leo and I backed away. Just then, sirens wailed in the distance. Kreshnik's eyes darted towards the sound. He hesitated, then ran towards the woods behind the house. Leo and I stood there, holding each other, as police cars skidded to a halt in the driveway. Detective Evans got out, her gun drawn. "Are you both okay?" she asked. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Leo was safe, but as I held him, I looked towards the woods where Kreshnik had disappeared. David was still out there. Back at the police station, Leo gave his statement. He confirmed everything. David sold him to Kreshnik to pay gambling debts, and he'd been moved between several locations. He'd managed to hide evidence and send clues, hoping I'd find them. He never lost faith in me. I sat with him, my hand on his, feeling a relief so deep it hurt. But the battle wasn't over. David was still at large, and he had my money. Detective Evans said they had issued an arrest warrant for David and were searching for Kreshnik. Ben worked on freezing David's assets and recovering my stolen funds. It would be a long legal process. Leo and I stayed with Betty for a few days. My house was still a crime scene, and I couldn't bear to go back yet. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Clara, my daughter. She looked ashamed. "Mum, Leo, I'm so sorry. David convinced me you were unstable. I should have believed you." I let her in. We talked for hours. She offered to help us get back on our feet. It was a small step towards healing. A week later, the police found David. He was arrested at a motel near the Canadian border, trying to flee with a fake passport. He had most of my money in cash with him. As he was led away in handcuffs, he looked at me with pure hatred. I felt nothing. Empty. Leo started therapy to deal with his trauma. I began the process of reclaiming my life, repairing my home, working with banks, and testifying against David. One evening, Leo and I were sitting on Betty's porch. He turned to me. "Grandma, thank you for not giving up on me." I squeezed his hand. "I will always fight for you, Leo." I knew the legal proceedings would drag on, and the emotional scars would remain. But we were together. That was all that mattered. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. David had set up a recurring transfer to an offshore account that was still active. The last transfer was scheduled for tomorrow. I showed it to Ben over the phone. He said he'd handle it. But as I hung up, I wondered what other secrets David had hidden. The fight was not over yet. The bank notification about the offshore transfer felt like a ghost from David reaching out from his jail cell. The scheduled transfer was for tomorrow, a final siphon of what was left. I had to stop it and uncover any other hidden accounts he might have set up. Letting it go through would mean losing more money. I needed to rebuild our lives. Ben was on it, but the bank's bureaucracy moved slowly. I called him immediately. "Ben, there's another transfer scheduled. Can we stop it?" He said he would contact the bank's fraud department right away. But as we spoke, I remembered David's habit of using birthdays as passwords. What if he had other accounts under different names? Leo was sitting with me, looking through old photo albums. He seemed peaceful for the first time in years. I didn't want to upset him, but I needed to know. I asked Leo if his dad ever mentioned any other bank accounts or safe places. Leo thought for a moment. He always said Grandma's house was the safest place for important things. That struck me. My house had been ransacked, but David knew I had hiding spots he never found. After the call with Ben, I decided to go back to my house. I needed to search it thoroughly one more time. Leo insisted on coming with me. We drove over, the house still bearing boards on the windows. Inside, the mess was overwhelming. We started in the basement, checking behind loose panels and in the ceiling tiles. Then, in my old sewing room, I moved the heavy cabinet that held my fabric bins. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a small, waterproof pouch. Inside was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. The paper had a list of account numbers and passwords. The USB drive had files named Backup. I plugged it into my laptop. It contained emails between David and a man named Arthur discussing shipments and payments. Arthur wasn't Kreshnik. This was someone new. As I scrolled, an email popped up from an unknown sender. "The deal is off. You talk? She dies." It was addressed to David's account, but it had been forwarded to this drive. Who was she? The threat in the email was vague, but terrifying. She could be me, or Clara, or even Sarah. I had to protect my family and find out who Arthur was. Leo was safe with me, but others might be in danger. Ben was already working with the police on the offshore transfer, but this was new. I forwarded the email to Detective Evans. She called back within minutes. "Eleanor, we need to see that USB drive immediately. Arthur might be another player in this network." I drove to the station with Leo, the drive in my pocket. Detective Evans took it and had her tech team analyze it. While we waited, Leo and I sat in the waiting area. He was quiet, staring at his hands. "Grandma?" he said softly. "I remember Arthur. He came to the warehouse once. He was older, well-dressed. He argued with Kreshnik about money." This was a breakthrough. Leo's memory was coming back in pieces. Detective Evans came out with a printout. "Arthur Finley. He's a businessman with a record for fraud. We think he was financing Kreshnik's operation. David was the middleman." The pressure was mounting. Arthur was still free and likely knew David was caught. As we left the station, my phone rang. It was Clara. She was crying. "Mum, I just got a strange call. A man said to tell you to back off, or else." My blood ran cold. Arthur was targeting Clara. I told her to go to a friend's house and not to be alone. Ben arranged for a patrol car to watch her place. But that wasn't enough. I needed to draw Arthur out, to make him make a mistake. I had an idea. Using the account numbers from the pouch, I could set up a trace with the bank. But it was risky. If Arthur detected it, he might vanish. I decided to work with Ben and the police to create a dummy transfer, one that would alert us when accessed. That night, as I tried to sleep, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You have something I want. Let's trade." It included a photo of Clara's house from earlier that day. The text with the photo of Clara's house was a direct threat. Arthur knew where she lived and was watching. I had to arrange a trade to protect Clara, but I couldn't actually give him anything valuable. Ben and Detective Evans set up a sting operation. They would monitor the exchange and arrest Arthur. It was a risky move. I was putting myself in danger, and if it failed, Clara could be hurt. We decided to reply, offering the USB drive in exchange for guarantees of safety. We set the meeting at a public place, a busy coffee shop downtown. I went alone, but police were nearby in unmarked cars. I sat at a table, the fake USB drive in my hand. My heart was pounding. A man approached, well-dressed, in his 60s. "Arthur." He sat down opposite me. "You have the drive?" he asked, his voice calm. I nodded. "And you'll leave my family alone?" He smiled. "Of course." As I handed it over, he grabbed my wrist. "But if this is a copy, I'll know." His grip was tight, painful. I pulled away and he stood up, pocketing the drive. He walked out quickly. The police followed him. I waited, shaking. Minutes later, Detective Evans called. "We lost him. He had a car waiting, and he drove off before we could stop him. But we have a tracker on the drive." It was something. Back at Betty's, I updated Ben. He was working on freezing the accounts from the list. Later that evening, Detective Evans called again. The tracker led us to a storage facility. We found documents linking Arthur to several shell companies. We have enough for a warrant. It was progress. But Arthur was still free. Then, my phone rang. It was David, calling from jail. He was allowed one phone call. His voice was desperate. "Mum, you have to help me. Arthur will kill me if I talk. He knows everything." I hung up. David's fear was palpable, but I felt no sympathy. Then, a new email arrived on my laptop. It was from Arthur. "You think you're clever, but you forgot about the insurance." Attached was a scanned document. It was a life insurance policy on Leo, taken out by David, with Arthur as the beneficiary. The life insurance policy was a horrifying revelation. David had insured Leo's life with Arthur as the beneficiary, meaning they profited from his disappearance. This was beyond debt. This was premeditated. I had to void this policy immediately and ensure Leo was protected legally. Ben contacted the insurance company, but they required proof of fraud and a court order. The pressure was immense. If anything happened to Leo, Arthur would collect. Leo was shaken when I told him. "He insured me? Like a car?" he said, his voice trembling. I held him tight. We increased security, with police regularly checking on us. Detective Evans expedited the warrant for Arthur's arrest based on the new evidence. But Arthur had gone underground. Days passed with no sign of him. I focused on rebuilding my life. The bank recovered most of my stolen funds, and I started repairing my house. Leo began online school to catch up on his education. Clara and I reconciled slowly. She helped with the house repairs and spent time with Leo. It felt like we were healing. But one afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from David, handwritten from jail. He begged for forgiveness, claiming Arthur forced him into everything, threatening to harm Sarah and Lily if he didn't comply. He included a drawing from Lily, my granddaughter, that said, "I miss you, Grandma." It tugged at my heart. Was he telling the truth? Or was this another manipulation? I showed the letter to Ben and Detective Evans. They said it could be a tactic to reduce his sentence. But I couldn't ignore the possibility that David was also a victim in some way. That evening, I visited David in jail. He looked older, defeated. "I'm sorry, Mum," he said, crying. "Arthur threatened to kill Lily if I didn't cooperate. I had no choice." I didn't know what to believe. As I left, the guard handed me a note. "Check your car." I went to the parking lot and found an envelope under my windshield wiper. Inside was a key and an address. The note said, "For Leo's future. A." It was from Arthur. The key and address from Arthur came as a complete surprise. Was it a trap or a genuine apology? I had to investigate, but carefully. Ben advised involving the police, but I wanted to see what it was first. The address was for a safety deposit box at a bank in the next city. I drove there with Leo, police following discreetly. At the bank, the key fit box number 114. Inside was a stack of cash, bonds, and a letter. The letter was from Arthur. It explained that he was cutting ties and leaving the country. He wrote that David was indeed coerced, but that didn't excuse his actions. The money was restitution for Leo, from profits Arthur made. He apologized for the harm caused. It was a shocking admission. I took the box contents to the police. They verified the money was clean. From legitimate sources, Arthur had mixed with his illegal gains. It was enough to secure Leo's education and future. With Arthur gone, the immediate threat was over. David's trial date was set, and he was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. I focused on healing with Leo. We moved back into my repaired house, slowly making it a home again. Clara and Lily visited often, and we started new traditions. One evening, Leo and I were in the garden, planting flowers. He turned to me. "Grandma, I want to help other kids like me. Can we use some of the money for that?" I agreed immediately. We set up a foundation to support victims of trafficking. It gave us a purpose. But as we worked on the paperwork, I received a call from the bank. They found another account under my name, one I didn't open, with a small balance. It was opened years ago, with David as a co-signer. I thought I had closed all joint accounts. What else was left hidden? The bank statement showed a joint account I never opened, with David's name still on it. The balance was small, but its existence meant David had access I didn't know about. I had to close this account today before any more surprises surfaced. This felt like a loose thread in a sweater, and if I pulled it, everything might unravel again. I drove to the bank with Leo, who was quiet in the passenger seat. At the bank, the manager, Mr. Higgins, recognized me. I showed him the statement. He pulled up the account details. "This was opened 5 years ago, Mrs. Wilkes. It's a custodial account for a minor." He looked at the screen. "For Lily Sanders, my granddaughter." David had set up an account for Lily without telling anyone. Why? The pressure built. Was this another scheme? I asked to see the transaction history. There were small deposits, but no withdrawals. I wanted to secure this for Lily, but I had to make sure David couldn't get to it. Mr. Higgins said since David was incarcerated, I could petition to become the custodian as the grandmother. I started the paperwork right there. As I signed the forms, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the court. David's sentencing hearing was moved up to next week. The timing felt connected. Leo touched my arm. "Grandma, is this good for Lily?" I nodded, but my mind raced. Why would David hide this? After finishing at the bank, we drove home. I checked the mail. There was a letter from David's lawyer. He wanted to meet to discuss family matters. I tossed it on the table. That evening, while Leo was doing homework, I searched through old files. I found a note from David dated years ago about setting aside something for Lily's future. It was scribbled on the back of a receipt. Then I remembered. David always talked about Lily going to college. Was this account his way of providing for her, despite everything? But why keep it secret? As I pondered, the doorbell rang. It was Sarah, David's wife. She looked tired. "Eleanor? We need to talk about Lily." Sarah stood on my porch, her arms crossed. She said David told her about the account for Lily and begged her to make sure I didn't shut it down. I had to understand Sarah's role in all this and protect Lily's interests without causing more family strife. Letting Sarah in meant reopening wounds, but Lily's future was at stake. Sarah's desperation was palpable. She was caught between David and what was right. I invited her inside. Leo greeted her quietly and went to his room. Sarah sat at the kitchen table. "David set up that account when Lily was born," she said. "He wanted it to be a surprise for her college. But then his gambling started, and he never touched it. He made me promise not to tell anyone, especially you, because he knew you'd question it." I listened, my tea cooling in front of me. "Why come now?" Sarah sighed. "With David in jail, I have no money. I'm struggling to keep our house. I need access to that account for Lily's expenses. But the bank won't let me without David's signature or a court order." The pressure was clear. Sarah was in a bind, and Lily could suffer. I told her about the process to make me custodian. She agreed to support it, but then she dropped a bombshell. David also had a safe deposit box at another bank. He gave me the key before he was arrested. He said it has documents about Arthur and others. This was new. A safe deposit box could have more evidence. I asked her where it was. She gave me the key and an address. He said to give it to you if anything happened to him. I took the key, my hand trembling. Why would David do that? Was it guilt? Or a trap? After Sarah left, I looked at the key. It was for a box in a bank across town. I decided to check it tomorrow. But first, I called Ben to update him. As I hung up, I noticed Leo listening from the hallway. "Grandma, are we safe?" he asked. I hugged him. "We will be, Leo. I promise." The key to the safe deposit box felt heavy in my pocket. I needed to see what was inside, hoping for closure, but fearing more lies. Leo insisted on coming with me for support. It meant digging deeper into David's lies. But we had to know. At the bank, the clerk led us to the vault. The box was small. I opened it. Inside were stacks of documents, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. There was also a flash drive. I took everything to a corner table. The envelope contained a letter from David. He wrote about his regrets, his fear of Arthur, and how he never meant for Leo to be hurt. He admitted to the insurance policy but claimed Arthur forced him. Then he mentioned something I never knew. Arthur had threatened to harm me if David didn't cooperate. David wrote, "I thought I was protecting you, Mum." The words felt hollow, but they shook me. The flash drive had more financial records, showing transfers to offshore accounts I hadn't found. One account was in Lily's name, with Arthur as the beneficiary again. The pressure mounted. We had to secure that account too. Leo read the letter over my shoulder. "He's still making excuses," he said softly. I agreed, but part of me wondered if there was truth in his fear. We took the documents to Detective Evans. She reviewed them and said they could help in the case against Arthur, even though he was gone. She also advised on voiding the insurance policy on Lily. Back home, I felt drained. The constant uncovering of secrets was exhausting. That night, I dreamed of David as a boy, smiling. I woke up with a start. The phone was ringing. It was the jail. David had attempted suicide. The call from the jail left me numb. David was in the hospital, stable but under watch. I had to face him one last time to get answers for my own peace. Leo didn't want me to go, but I needed closure. Facing him would be emotionally tough, but I couldn't bear the uncertainty. I drove to the hospital alone. David looked pale, tubes in his arms. He turned his head when I entered. "Mum?" he whispered. I sat beside him. "Why, David?" He cried, recounting how Arthur threatened to kill me and Leo if he didn't comply. He said the account for Lily was his one good deed, and the safe deposit box was his way of apologizing. He claimed he never wanted any of this. I listened, my heart hardening with each word. Excuses or not, the damage was done. The pressure was off now. Arthur was gone, and David was broken. But I needed him to understand the pain he caused. "Leo suffered, David. He still has nightmares." David nodded, tears streaming. "I know. I'm sorry." I stood to leave. "I forgive you for my sake, not yours, but you have to face the consequences." As I walked out, he called after me, "Tell Leo I love him." I didn't respond. Outside, the sun was setting. I felt a weight lift, but also a sadness. Back home, Leo was waiting. "How was it?" he asked. I hugged him. "It's over, Leo. We can move on now." We sat in the garden, watching the stars. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of calm. But then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. "Mum, Lily wants to see you. She has something to tell you." Lily's visit was a bright spot in our healing. She came over with Clara, carrying a drawing she made for me. It showed our family under a rainbow, with Leo and me holding hands. I had to embrace this new beginning, letting go of the past for the sake of the future. We had lost so much, but we gained each other. Lily handed me the drawing. "Grandma, I miss you," she said. I hugged her tight. Leo showed her the garden, and they laughed together. Clara and I sat on the porch. "I'm sorry for not believing you, Mum," she said. I told her it was okay. We talked about the foundation Leo and I started, and she offered to help. The pressure was gone. We were just a family again, flawed but together. Later, Ben called to say the courts had finalized everything. The accounts were secured, David's sentence was reduced due to cooperation, and he'd be in prison for a long time. Arthur was still at large, but the case was cold. I hung up and looked at Leo and Lily playing. This was enough. That evening, Leo and I planted a new tree in the garden, a symbol of growth. He said, "Grandma, I think we're going to be okay." I smiled. "We are, Leo. We are." As the sun set, I sat in my rocking chair, the same one I've had for years, and watched the kids. The revenge I sought turned into justice, and the anger faded into peace. My family was broken, but we were mending. I closed my eyes, listening to their laughter. It was a quiet victory, one I could live with.